Hi, and welcome to Teaching Tip Tuesday, brought to you by the Center for Inclusive Teaching and Learning at UWSP. As college instructors, we usually have a pretty good handle on what it is we think that the students should learn in our courses. We carefully outline learning outcomes and scaffold our courses with baby steps that provide all that students should need to reach the learning goals we've set out for them. Despite all of the work we put in, there are always some students who just can't seem to get it. From the perspective of the instructor, it sometimes feels almost as if the students are being deliberately obtuse. We've laid the groundwork and set out carefully paved and marked pathways, but students still aren't reaching the destination. It's frustrating. But sometimes the ability to learn and properly assimilate new information is hampered by the way that human brains typically work. There are psychological processes that make new learning harder than you might assume. That's why this week I'd like to tackle cognitive dissonance in the classroom. Cognitive dissonance, a concept introduced by psychologist Leon Festinger, refers to the mental discomfort experienced when an individual holds two or more contradictory beliefs, values, or attitudes simultaneously. In the context of college courses, this discomfort often arises when students encounter information that conflicts with their pre-existing knowledge or beliefs. For example, a student who believes that intelligence is fixed might experience cognitive dissonance when presented with evidence supporting the idea that intelligence can be developed through effort or learning. Or a student who believes that vaccinations are dangerous might experience cognitive dissonance when presented with data supporting the efficacy and safety of vaccines. This dissonance can significantly impact learning in college courses. When students face cognitive dissonance, they're motivated to reduce the discomfort. Although psychologists have been discussing cognitive dissonance for almost 70 years, there's still no real coherent theory of how dissonance is resolved. But there's been a lot of research into the ways that people resolve the feelings associated with dissonance. They include changing attitudes and beliefs, distraction and forgetting, trivialization and self-affirmation, denial of responsibility, adding consonant cognitions, changing behavior, or rationalizing their actions. One thing is clear: people are usually aware of a discrepancy and don't like the way it makes them feel. Now, how all of this manifests in educational settings varies. Cognitive dissonance can lead students to deeper engagement with course materials as they strive to reconcile the new information presented in their classes with their existing knowledge. Or it can lead to behaviors that impede learning. One of the most useful things you can do as an instructor is to go over a brief explanation of cognitive dissonance and its effects with your students. This will give them a framework for understanding some of their responses if your class triggers dissonance. Here are some of the manifestations of students dealing with cognitive dissonance, presented with teaching strategies to help limit their effects. First, resistance to new information. When students encounter information that contradicts their pre-existing beliefs, they tend to reject, dismiss, or minimize its importance, impeding their ability to learn new concepts. This is especially problematic in our current socio-political climate, where salient group identities are tied to specific beliefs about history, economics, biology, medicine, climatology, and chemistry, that are often tied to gross misunderstandings or misrepresentations of how any of these things actually work. So, how can you deal with this? First, be cognizant of commonly held beliefs that you're contradicting. All education begins by meeting students where they are. Fostering conditions in which students can productively engage with new ideas means that you need to be aware of pre-existing knowledge and understanding that students are working with. If conspiracy theories or misinformation about what you're attempting to teach are common, you can't simply expect students to learn while ignoring what they think they know. Next, encourage metacognitive reflection. This will help students recognize biases and pre-existing beliefs that might be preventing them from learning. Encourage open-mindedness. Create a classroom environment in which students feel comfortable expressing different perspectives and not committing to a perspective until evaluating the assumptions, biases, reasoning, and evidence associated with multiple perspectives. Finally, promote deep thinking and applying the same level of scrutiny to diverse perspectives. It's not uncommon that people reject, dismiss, or minimize the importance of information and ideas that conflict with their pre-existing beliefs. By combining deep thinking and open-mindedness, you improve the prospect of students connecting with and understanding new information. Another common manifestation of cognitive dissonance is avoidance of challenging topics. Students may avoid engaging with material that makes them feel uncomfortable, which includes material that conflicts with their values and pre-existing beliefs. This is a way many people manage cognitive dissonance, and it can lead to knowledge gaps that are detrimental to student progress. One way to deal with this in your teaching is to expose students to challenging concepts gradually through scaffolding. This may include deconstructing commonly held ideas before introducing alternatives, or introducing evidence before proposing alternative explanatory frameworks, allowing students to evaluate which framework is supported by the evidence. You can also use multiple real-life examples, sources, and different types of evidence. This can help in the evaluation of different theories, and it can be useful in dispelling myths, conspiracies, and erroneous beliefs. Superficial learning is a common response to cognitive dissonance. Students may engage in surface-level learning in which they memorize facts without understanding or engaging the underlying principles and theories. This reduces their dissonance. This is a form of avoidance. You can deal with this by including activities that promote deeper learning. For example, using problem-based learning and inquiry-based learning to encourage students to engage deeply with the content. Assign projects that require critical analysis and synthesis of information. These types of activities enhance understanding and retention of complex concepts. Students experiencing cognitive dissonance may show negative emotional response. Feelings of frustration, anxiety, and anger can manifest, especially if students feel that their core beliefs are being attacked. It can make students feel that acceptance of information that contradicts beliefs undermines their salient group affiliations. A negative emotional response can decrease student motivation and focus, making it even more difficult to absorb and retain information in what is sometimes called the backfire effect. This is one reason that it is important to foster a non-judgmental, supportive environment in your classroom. Encouraging open communication and using non-judgmental questions to foster understanding rather than to push a specific perspective can make students feel supported and heard, which can mitigate their negative emotional response to challenging content. Make sure that you provide opportunities for self-reflection in relation to course material, in which students examine how they are reacting and what they think is behind their reactions. This can be constructive in helping them recognize the dissonance they're experiencing. As students grapple with cognitive dissonance, they may also experience some confirmation bias. This is associated with trivialization and self-affirmation and adding consonant cognitions. Students may seek out alternative sources of information that conform to their pre-existing beliefs and disregard evidence to the contrary. If you have designed your course to include diverse perspectives, it's easier to deal with. A couple of useful strategies include critical consideration of diverse sources of information. This reduces confirmation bias. Design assignments that require students to investigate and critique their own assumptions and other sources that they've consulted. It's important for students to analyze the evidence for and against diverse arguments, as well as the logic of the arguments. You can use debates and peer reviews. This technique can help students to consider alternative perspectives. If you want to make the debates less personal, you can assign students to a particular perspective without regard to their personal beliefs. That way, criticism of the idea is less likely to be interpreted as criticism of the individual. Students with cognitive dissonance may show resistance to feedback. It's common for them to interpret constructive feedback as evidence of instructor bias. You can combat this by fostering a non-judgmental classroom in which questions are asked to clarify and to understand diverse perspectives. Make sure that feedback is constructive. Providing feedback that is specific, actionable, and focused on improvement will help students to view your feedback as more impartial. Finally, encourage students to reflect on your feedback and to set their own goals for learning. This can help students digest and act upon feedback. Remember, our students don't come to us as blank slates. They have lived experiences and knowledge that may inhibit their ability to assimilate course content, but by engaging in constructive teaching practices, you can help them overcome cognitive dissonance. And that's this week's teaching tip, brought to you by the Center for Inclusive Teaching and Learning here at UWSP. At CITL, we offer support for course design, learning activities, assessment, and pedagogy. Visit our website to schedule a consultation today.